Hi, this is Privateer Station, and we bring you day 467 of Putin's invasion into Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Olexiy Arestovych, and Russian opposition politician, blogger, and lawyer Mark Feygin. Thank you for your continuous support. Please do not forget to click the like button and to subscribe if you have not done that yet. And with that, day 467. Enjoy. Dear friends, glad to see you all on Feygin Live channel. It is Monday, June 5th. Time is 3 minutes past 11 in Kiev, same time in Moscow, and we're doing a usual stream with our regular guest, Olexiy Arestovych. Glad to see you, Olexiy. I've met you somewhere, Mark, today. Yeah, likewise, I've met you as well. I want to say, so there is no intrigue, me and Olexiy are in Brussels. We are participating in the conference organized by European Parliament. It's no intrigue really. Just some people are asking if we can do the stream together. Unfortunately, we do not have a technical capability to be in the same room. Plus, also, Olexiy is married, and we should not be sharing the same room in the hotel. After the pictures we posted in Brussels, our haters keep posting a ton of stuff. So, yeah, we'll do it in this format. Do not forget to click like, subscribe if you have not done it, and make sure to share that stream. That helps us to get to the recommended, to get more eyeballs so more people see and learn what is happening on the front. And do not forget to subscribe to Alexei's channel as well, and to the Privateer Station if you are listening or watching that in English language. Alright, let's start. So, I think we should start with several crucial news that matter most. So, to close the question first, the news about Bakhmut. Pushilin, the representative of the occupation administration, we know his nickname. I will not say it now. He states that the city is constantly shelled. The situation is really difficult for the occupants. And a little earlier, the head of Wagner, Prigozhin, mentioned that Ukraine military took a village above Bakhmut to the north of it, and posted a bunch of questions to Shoigu and Gerasimov, and a direct quote from Pushilin that part of Verkhovka is already lost and Russian troops are fleeing. Shame, wrote Pushilin. So we'll talk more about the statements made by Minister of Defense of Russian Federation that counteroffensive apparently is happening. It seems like Bakhmut is again in the crosshairs. And probably people from Ukraine can soon visit Bakhmut again, just take a ride from Chasiv Yar like I did. Do you think, is it true to say that Wagner could hold Bakhmut and Minister of Defense cannot? Well, they kind of could, but they were also losing positions there because 73rd Brigade kicked Wagner, including with Russian troops, when they started operations on deblocking the pincers around Bakhmut. And right now, Wagner is transferring that business to Russian official military. And by the way, it's real official military. There are some paratroopers, there are some infantry, there are motorized infantry. And unfortunately for them, they cannot hold it as well as Wagner did. And our president already congratulated our 3rd Storm Brigade with advancements. We're not going to describe all the details, but to compare, it took Wagner probably about 30-40 days to take 1.5 kilometers, wasting thousands of people. And we managed to take that in a lieu of several days with way less casualties. And we basically take it in a day, take back all the territory. So can we still, however, Alexei, make a statement that Wagner is fighting better than Russian military? Oh yeah, absolutely. It is a big shame for Putin's army and Putin's regime that their mercenaries are fighting better than the regular army. Because until Putin's engagements and attacks on all the neighbors around Russia, Russian military had a story that had a fame of the victorious army, and many said analysts in the West were nodding their heads and saying, "Well, no, Russian military cannot be won over." And in lieu of this war, we discovered that private mercenary corps Wagner is way better than the proper military, and they shouldn't be, according to the to all the military laws with all the equipment and all the supplies that Russian military have versus Wagner. Wagner should not be at the top of the pecking order. But unexpectedly, all the serious tasks in this war were carried out by Wagner. Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Solidar, Bakhmut, all these towns were taken with an active participation of Wagner, or by them entirely. So, okay, let's start a poll then, Alexei. And it's going to be provocative, as usual. We like those, especially like the one last time about the nuclear strike on Russian town. Today's question will be probably addressed to Shoigu. I wish he watches the stream and pushes buttons. After Wagner leaves Bakhmut, will Ukrainian military take it back in a week, in a month, or never? Now we have already, people are fast, already 4,000 clicked. In a week, 61%, in a month, 36%, never 3%. So I guess we have more optimists in our channel. So if you are watching it live, you can vote. About 50,000 of you clicked the like button, 150,000 are with us. And in Belgorod, the situation continues to develop. That shit-faced Gladkov, representative of Putin's administration there, disappeared and decided to not interact with the Liberation Army, with Freedom of Russia Legion and Voluntary Corps. And I did say last time that Gladkov is a coward, and they eventually will be caught. He eventually will be caught by Volunteer Corps, and his life will be over. And I got a ton of threats about the ice pick and some military intel trying maybe to reach out and assassinate me. So he probably got my message from the earlier stream, and he's really scared now. And I would still shake my finger at him and say that, no, dude, you know that your life is going to be over after all the crimes you've done. And he refused to communicate with Volunteer Corps, the ones that are liberating Russian territory from Putin's influence, and refused to negotiate for the prisoners of war. So right now we have 4 villages taken by Russians fighting on the opposite side to Putin. There is no detailed information coming from Kremlin about this operation. They're just saying it is ongoing. I looked at the map on purpose. I did not believe my eyes. From Shebekina that they took to Belgorod, it's only 37 kilometers. You can drive the motorcycle probably in what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Well, first of all, Mark, there are also rumors about evacuation of the Belgorod population. And you can see it on the map, it's in the center. Shebekina is at 5 o'clock, near the green area. So we can look at the different events around it, since we do not have an exact picture. We can see that Ukrainian Intel published a document who was by the person who was the leader of the paratroopers. He was the senior officer of Russian guards as well. So does it mean that with Russian military, they had Russian guard fighting alongside against the Freedom of Russia? Yeah, it probably does matter that. But when you see that the officer in charge of that region dies or gets killed during the action, and our liberators get his documents, that's either a sign of really hard fighting or also perhaps a very successful operation. And I also want to say that the order of bravery that Gladkov got from Putin a while ago should be renamed the Order of Special Bravery. Oh, you're so merciful to him. I would say, Olexiy, that this order, once the war is over, will be shoved up, where, with this administrator. And, I'm still looking at the poll. 64% are now confirming that after Wagner leaves, in a week it will be taken by Ukrainian military. By the way, look at the map about the point that Prigozhin was posting his videos about. This settlement is on the road Bakhmut-Slaviansk. So if he is screaming that is being liberated by Ukraine, it means that we are restoring a second road to Bakhmut. And roads are supply lines. Supply lines is an opportunity to concentrate your forces actively and to essentially expedite the actions on the counteroffensive. And then there is another interesting area near Krasnaya Gora, which is a connecting area between Solidar and Bakhmut. And it'll be very interesting. I would not project what's going to happen, but it's definitely a very peculiar part of the front. All right. The next news I wanted to bring up is that Russian Congress is about to adopt a project that would allow a law that would allow to send conscription notes to Russian population via text messages. So imagine that, right? It's a glorious day, and then you get a text message saying, dude, pack your bags and pack the black bag with you. Yeah, I would suggest, Mark, they should follow the experience of France back in the 18th century, 19th century, that they could do a lottery. So they did an overall list of all the people who could serve in the military, and they had a lottery, so random numbers were picked. So do you think they'll announce general mobilization in Russia? I don't think they will officially announce that, but they will continue pulling more people in. And the problem is that they're running out of equipment. They're trying to restore more equipment from conservation, but the quality and the age of that equipment is horrible. As just a human, I can say that those people that are being drafted face a very sad destiny, because I'm not even talking about Kalashnikovs that they may or may not get. They may get Mosin's rifle from early 20th century. And I also want to emphasize that it's not Russian army that we're talking about, it's Putin's army. After the raid of Russian Volunteer Corps and Legion Freedom of Russia onto the borderline territories, we should differentiate between Putin's troops and these detachments. Right, we'll talk about that towards the end of the stream, and we'll also talk a little bit about the Congress that we're attending in the European Parliament, and the message that is being heard about the necessity to continue supplying and supporting military action. So let me ask you more technical questions. Does it mean, Olexiy, that they actually have no capability or no troops to move from front to Belgorod region? Do you think that operation is connected with their hesitance on the front and indecisiveness there? Okay, Mark, I would say that it's the same command that is in charge of Belgorod region and the Kupinsk-Liman direction on the Ukrainian occupied side. So I would say that, first of all, the fights in that region are pretty hard. Deutsche Welle published today that in Svatova they got at least 20 trucks with wounded transported to their medical facilities, and of course it could be people from Bakhmut, but that's further away, so most likely it's got to be Kremenaya. And that means that situation on the front is pretty rough, and that means that they could have been glad and happy to take the forces from the front and send them to Belgorod to take care of the Russian liberation forces. But I suspect they just can't. They don't know where the main direction of counteroffensive is going to be, so they're still tied up on the front. And many people are asking, is it counteroffensive? Is it counteroffensive? I would say let them think it is counteroffensive. That would be my formulation. Olexiy, I was reading newspapers in Europe, since I reside here now. Probably a couple months before counteroffensive, there were already conversations about possible intrusion onto the territory of proper Russian Federation, and they did not expect that to last. They considered it to be temporary endeavors, but we're seeing now that Russian volunteers and Russian citizens are the ones carrying out these operations. Let's call them operations of liberation of Russian territory from Putin's regime and Putin's enforcement agencies. So these detachments are liberating Russian territory from that. And it's interesting that it was discussed a couple months before, and I wonder if it was leaked or Mark, maybe, but they could have also guessed that this is one of the obvious scenarios that was on the table. It was not too hard to venture this way. I would say that the Sliman Kupin's group they had of Russian troops, they were the last detachment, the last group of troops that had some capacity for tactical operative maneuver and offensive maneuver on the front. But right now they got their hands full because they still need to maintain the front line. They need to perhaps aid the group down south from them in Bakhmut, and they also need to figure out what to do about Belgorod. And remember, we talked a couple of weeks ago when I said that Russian command will be flabbergasted to figure out where is the main direction of attack coming from. They're bending over the maps and trying to figure that out and breaking their heads what to do. And that's good. We need them in this condition. We need them giving hectic, disruptive orders without proper flow. And we are continuing to bring them in that state. And whenever they finally reach the apogee of that, then I would suspect will the main action unfold on the front. All right, so Olexiy, next question is in relation to Russian prisoners of war that Legion Freedom of Russia and Russian Volunteer Corps took as a part of their raid along the border villages, and they recorded a video. They offered a governor of the region to come visit them and trade for the prisoners of war. The governor disappeared, and Prigozhin came out, and he was behaving kind of like the king, and he was addressing Denis, the commander of the White Rex, commander of Russian Volunteer Corps, directly and trying to negotiate and arrange something with them. So first of all, I would say this is recognition, right? They stopped calling them terrorists or something. They realized that these troops are the real force. And sooner or later, they will have to negotiate with Volunteer Corps or with Caesar from Legion of Freedom of Russia. So yeah, it is a military opposition, but they started to recognize them as subjects. They're not terrorists. They're not shadow diversion groups. They are fighting in the open, and in that horizontal pain, they are in the same position as the head of Wagner, Ostelkov, or anyone else. And the second is an interesting position when Russians fighting for liberation of Russia take prisoners, military prisoners, and they send them to Ukraine so they can be exchanged for prisoners later. So if anything, they are getting a good destiny because they're not going to be killed on the front. They will be exchanged for Ukrainian military, for Ukrainian fighters later. So if anything, that's a good eventuality for these captives. And the Russian administration refused to trade, so that's another peculiar thing. And it's interesting that Russia attacked Ukraine, and now Ukraine is taking care of well-being of Russian military that they capture on the territory of Putin's federation. And yeah, it's kind of surreal. And note that all the Putin's channels are mum about that. They're talking about weird news about milking lemmings on Baikal, about some agriculture in Siberia, but except for the events in Belgorod region, which highlights once again that they don't know what to do about it. They don't know how to talk about it. Second point, it's an eternal question of good Russians. That's what I was talking about during my statement in the EU Parliament. When I was asked, is it possible for different Russia to be? A lot of people are skeptical that other Russia cannot happen, that there is some generational curse on that territory and they're just incapable. And I'm pointing towards Legion of Russia, Freedom of Russia, and Russian Volunteer Corps. part of the people fighting there used to be military. They actually invaded Ukraine as a part of Putin's war machine. Probably they were shooting in the direction of peaceful citizens, not executing them, but shooting in the direction of Ukrainian towns. But when their political culture and ideation changed, and Legion has a different ideation behind it, we can see that their fighting style changed. They're trying to save lives, they're trying to not harm peaceful citizens. So these people who recently fought as a part of the totalitarian Putin's machine, now they're fighting in a different style for freedom of Russia in a different group. So what I'm highlighting here is that if you change the ideation, if you change the banner under which people are fighting, if you change the goals for which they're fighting, you may end up getting a different country. It is not a genetic thing, it is always a choice. And it's a choice to choose the idea you're fighting for. One of them is the idea, Putin's idea of fear and suppression, and the other, the Legion's idea of freedom. And we're seeing very different people who used to be part of his machine before. I would say the idea is the most important. The change of idea is the change of culture, and change of culture changes a lot of other things downstream. And that's it. I agree about it, Olexiy. There's an old thesis about that environment forms a person to a big degree. And I've seen that people who move to a different country and they're not used to using trash bins, so they throw their cigarette butts everywhere until they get 1, 2, 3 warnings from police, and then all of a sudden they are actually following rules and putting them in the right place. So you're also confirming that, right? It's about the environment, it's about the ideation. If that can change, the country can change. And yeah, we're actually talking about real things. We're not talking about hypotheticals here. Because you cannot pay enough money to anyone with Russian passport, so he would just go and fight against Putin's regime just for money. This has got to be a personal motivation. Yep, that's true. We have 213,000 watching us live and 74,000 click the like button. Do not forget to do that. Let's take a look at the map. You touched upon certain parts of it, but let's also look at other sections of the front. Kherson, since some things are happening there, and south of Zaporozhye, where Ministry of Russian Federation, Minister of Defense stated that they already see the counteroffensive operations there. And then there were some controversial statements, but Hanna Maler came out, I think she's the second in command in the Ukrainian military, with a statement saying that yes, we are active on the front too. All right, if you look at the map, Bakhmut is still the main point of attention on the front. Here it is on the map, zooming in. Down south, of course, Hanna Maler acknowledged that there are operations and motions. And in Kherson, in Zaporozhye, they're talking about, some sources say Ukrainian military pushed in for 400 yards, the others say 1.5 kilometers. But those are not the main actions. So those are, I would say Bakhmut is still the focal point. As for Kherson, again, not the core point of tension, but there were some good explosions on their side in the last 24 hours, and that's always good news. And then Liman, Kremenna, and Kupiansk, in that area we're showing now, it's towards here at the bottom of the map, 5 and 6 o'clock. So they broke the ammonia pipeline and during one of their shellings. So it leaked apparently, and unfortunately for the Russian occupants, the wind blows in their direction, so it's being blown towards them. Our measurements along the front did not show increased level of ammonia, and yeah, they're getting the results of their own shelling. So I would say point number 1 is Bakhmut, point number 2 is Kupiansk-Liman, that we just showed. Third would be Zaporozhye in the south. And I would say the most important is the events in Belgorod. Yep, right there to the north at 12 and 11 o'clock. These are the events that are breaking trust in Putin's regime, that Putin's regime cannot even defend itself. And there is a new political power growing. as the armed opposition. And today, a lot of speakers worth of notion did support that we need to recognize political opposition to Putin, military armed political opposition. And this, if that becomes really widely recognized in the world, that will be a very strong counterpart to Putin's regime. I actually posted in Telegram, and Twitter, and Facebook. We left a link to the cast. I'm moderating a panel tomorrow on the conference of European Parliament, Russian opposition, and we'll be talking about that in the context of constitution, empire or not, freedom for peoples living on the territory of Russia, and what is the potentiality where it can go. We'll show a little bit of video here. We'll see if it works. We took one of the Telegram news channels, and Russian Volunteer Corps are holding New Tavalzhanka in Belgorod region, and there's a direct appeal by White the commander of Russian volunteers. Since Governor Gladkov cannot control his territory, we'll talk to his superiors that are in Moscow. And I'm adding here for myself, Lavrov, get ready to come and see these guys down there. Okay, let's get the video. We're recording from Novaya Tavalzhanka. This is not a small village. This settlement has 5,000 people. It is empty now. It is just our fighters here. There is no power in that region as well. And since Mr. Gladkov cannot control his territory, we will be talking then to his superiors only in Moscow. So here is the video. We are just improvising here. Olexiy, you did not see what was going on, so I'm just telling you that it's the video where White is saying that they have occupied or liberated New Tavalzhanka. It is completely under their control, and there are no representatives of local power. It is empty now, but it is fully taken by Russian Volunteer Corps. And they offer Moscow to start negotiations, if they're brave enough. And Mark, I want to mention here that those prisoners of war that they showed before in the earlier videos, the ones they captured there, they're all identified. They indeed are people serving in Putin's army, and we know their names, we know their ranks. And now they've been sent to the territory of Ukraine, right? As Caesar mentioned from the Freedom of Russia. Yeah. All right. So, and don't judge us harshly if we misstate one of the storm brigades or the brigades fighting on the front. We're doing stream late at night, and there are a lot of numbers. So if we make an error, just please correct us in the chat. And still, over 60% say that Ukraine military will deoccupy Bakhmut in about a week after Prigozhin leaves, and 30% plus think that in about a month, and almost no one, about 2%, think that it'll never be deoccupied. All right, before we continue, I remind you that there'll be some links to materials at the bottom of this video to the European stream tomorrow. Mark, I want to say that there are explosions in Kharkiv right now, and the Russian side got 6 bombers in air, so there is a high probability that there'll be another aerial attack. So, dear viewers, please, if you live there, please do not ignore the sirens. So do you think why they're doing it? Is it revenge, retaliation for Belgorod? I would suspect yes. They kept doing it before, and they're still doing it now. Yeah, no, I said it. Okay, I have another question then, related to the events in Belgorod. At first, Americans acknowledged that, yeah, probably some of our weapons are being used, we'll investigate, etc. And then they were pretty quiet about it. I would say that Americans, of course, are aware of all the details of that operation, but they just slow moving it, slow motioning it. Belgium saw some of their weapons among the rifles that are carried by Russian Volunteer Corps, and they made a statement that, oh, we are surprised that some of our weapons are being used on the territory of Russia. They have not supplied directly to these units, but still, in your opinion, it is ongoing for a while, right, on the borderline regions of Russia. Um, Mark, I would say that, yeah, while there is some investigation of what they're using, it could be a trophy weapon. It could be a re-trophy weapon. These weapons could have been captured by Russians near Bakhmut, and then Volunteer Corps could have retaken them back from the occupied territories. These could be weapons that they acquired in the process of their raid. They could have also got the trophies from some of the warehouses they got during their raid. So before accusing anyone, one needs to do the proper investigation and find out where exactly is it coming from. But I suspect the Belgian government will get all the proper explanations eventually, even if that indeed happened. I would say that Legion and Volunteer Corps, for the most part, are using a lot of trophy weapons, a lot of equipment and arms that they acquire on the enemy's territory. And it's understandable because it's much easier to refill your ammo from the ammo that you acquire during the fighting, especially if you're doing that far from the front line. So if you have an armored vehicle in APC, you can capture a similar one, and then boom, you have a new uh, set of shells and more ammo to yours. Okay, going back into the poll, Bakhmut will be recaptured after Wagner leaves 64% saying in a week, 30 plus percent saying in a month, and 2% are saying never. So I think our viewers are pretty optimistic about the perspectives of that line. And unfortunately, the poll seems to have stalled on us. We're doing it live, so these systems are a little glitchy. All right, what else is from the important news? Regarding the approaching NATO summit in Lithuania, there are more news coming, and it seems like most of the countries did say that do not expect the date when Ukraine will be adopted into the NATO. But still, do you think that if until the summit start date in July, and if that counteroffensive starts before then and is really successful, do you think it will influence the position of countries in that summit? Yeah, Mark, I don't know it'll affect anything. It is unreal to discuss these dates while the active phase of this war is going, because nobody can predict when it will be done and how. So our main task is not to discuss the date. Our main task is to discuss continuous support with arms. And I want also emphasize here that there'll be a second counteroffensive and a third counteroffensive effort. And the second wave probably will happen sometime in the autumn time frame and will likely have F-16s as part of it. And what's most important for us to have more modern equipment so we could effectively utilize it on the front. And I suspect there'll be some commentary, there'll be affirmations and signals given to Ukrainian delegation that there'll be a path forward in NATO. But the main result of that would be a good package of military support, military supplies. And until the war is over, I don't think we can talk about any hard dates. Well, I agree, but I would also say that they could say that we'll take you in on the 25th of January. Oh, sorry, in January of 2025. That would still give a year and a half, right? No, Mark, this is not a serious politics. This will be an adventurism because it needs to be. It may happen when you have one leader, but when you have a collegiate decision, it is more measured. It is more bureaucratic, but. While they will not be able probably to give an exact date, they will still give enough affirmation that yes, Ukraine will become part of NATO. And the main thing is that they continue supporting us with arms because we still have a ton of scope left on the table. By the way, did you see another news that Wagner captured Lieutenant Colonel, by the way, from the Russian military? And they interviewed him on that video. And they captured him, right, and he is saying that I was shooting in the direction of Wagner, and he also set landmines on the way of their passage. And it's entertaining. Yeah, he did acknowledge that he did it because of a severe personal dislike to Wagner, and it's amazing that now they're fighting between each other on the Russian side, and Putin's forces are now fighting each other. And unlike them, we actually remove the ones from the front and we trade them later. These guys, I don't know what will be his destiny. They still have him captured in Wagner, and he acknowledges on the video that he just hates Wagner and he was shooting at them because of this. You know, it's interesting. Wagner just evaded an active fight with Kadyrov people, with Akhmat battalion, because that will have a continuation. Since Wagner did not battle back after they've been called upon by Kadyrov people, they basically responded and said, "Yeah, let's meet. We'll show you what you can do." So, in Russian regions, they definitely are indicating themselves to be an alternative force, an alternative source of power. And here they are capturing Russian lieutenant colonel. It's not some random infantryman. This is a pretty high-ranking officer. So, do you think it indicates a destruction of process? I want to tell an old anecdote from the Soviet times. There's a settlement deep in Siberia. Two guys are sitting near the house smoking self-made cigarettes, and they have a radio working, listening. They're listening in from the window, and it says in Moscow it's 9 p.m. In Catherineburg, Sverdlovsk, it's 10 p.m. In Omsk, it's 11 p.m. and so on of each time zone. And one looks at the other and says, "Dude, what a mess in the country." Right, yeah. And it's reminiscent of Davlatov and his stories when he was laughing about the government media. So, do you think this will have a continuation in general? Because Prigozhin is pushing the boundaries. He is seriously pushing the boundaries of the system position that he used to have. And he is now a contender not just to the governor of Belgorod region position, which might make sense to put Prigozhin there because he is essentially saying, remove your asshole that is currently in charge and I will guarantee your borders. Mark, yeah, I think it's a higher level of statement than a governor. Because if he is questioning Shoigu and Gerasimov and their legitimacy, and also the heads of subject of federation, of course, that indicates that he's got some federal level aspirations. We'll see what happens. I would think that in Russia, especially in the fighting Russia, the country that fights the war, it cannot be allowed. So it will either continue escalating if Prigozhin can escalate it further with his sponsors, and he will have a choice to either be killed in the way or perhaps win. And we'll see how it unfolds. It'll be pretty curious. All right, we've been live for about 39 minutes. Last news, I think, is interesting. A couple hours ago, it became known that Soviet spy, ex-high-ranking FBI officer, and he died. He was pretty old, and he died in prison. He got a life term in prison for treason. There's a whole movie shot about him, and it's a whole story with money, with his debts and other things. He was a very specific character with certain likes and such and deviations. And so he died in prison today at the age of 79. And American prison, of course, is not a walk in the park. And you guys can correct me in the chat, but I remember Russian FSB wanted to exchange him for someone, but he personally refused. And it's an interesting situation when, why am I bringing it up? There is a number of other agents on both sides. For example, Assange that will be extradited to the United States, and the others. Why I'm asking is that Russia still has some political prisoners. It's a common practice back in the communist days and the Soviet Union days, and Bukovsky was exchanged for Korvalan. And right now, we could probably look into saving some of the Russian political prisoners. Do you think there are any chances that people of that caliber can be used? Mark, I think that this should be one of the tasks of Russian united opposition. And of course, there are people who are prisoners of political prisoners in Russia, and leaders of Russian opposition need to discuss that with the West and see if they can exchange the significant people of significant political value for other things, for other people they captured, like the one who killed Hangashvili in Europe, one of the special forces, special agents. So they definitely have a fund of captured Russian operatives that they can exchange. And Mark, besides political prisoners, there's also a group of Azov fighters and more Ukrainian military that Russia has. So there definitely is an opportunity there. It's a discussion with European level, parliamentary level authorities to see what can they offer in exchange and perhaps push it with Russia. Okay, 275,000 watched us on my channel. About 90,000 plus click the like button. And yeah, sorry, it's a difficult day. We've been busy the whole day with Olexiy in different meetings throughout the day. But anyway, thank you, dear viewers, for watching us. Do not forget to share links, click the like button, and subscribe if you have not done that yet to Feygin Live, to Olexiy Arestovych, and to the Privateer Station if you are listening or watching that in English language. And tomorrow, as I promised, there'll be a link to the broadcasting in the European Parliament. It'll be 10 in the morning European time, 11 in Kiev, 11 in Moscow morning. You can watch the broadcast of that panel that I'll be moderating. There'll be interesting guests there. Do not miss it, and I hope it will be interesting for you to see what Russian opposition thinks about future. Olexiy, thank you a ton for participating, and I'll see you tomorrow, right? Yes, of course. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.